Shalom, hello, Erev Tov. Welcome to another important webinar, live webinar coming to you tonight from Israel. I'm Jay Shofet with the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel. Thank you, everybody, for coming. 30 people already. Please let us know in the chat where you're from. Always like to see the diversion, the diverse nature of our crowd here tonight. Appreciate everybody joining today, this afternoon. Hello, Jonathan, our esteemed board chairman of Nature Israel in the United States. Thank you to Jonathan and to all our board members out there and in the world, and of course our board members in Israel as well, all volunteers working for the cause of nature protection, nature conservation, sustainable development, environmental education, trailblazing, and all kinds of things that we do here. And especially these days, had a vigorous response. We're having a vigorous response to the troubles in Israel. It's day 149 of the war, and we have hosted evacuees in our field schools and turned our field schools into pop-up elementary schools and hosted all kinds of people and events out in nature. That's what we're doing now for the last 4 months, really. Nature heals is our motto, and we're getting as many Israelis out to nature as frequently as possible to help people relax. Being in nature is proven to relieve symptoms of stress, anxiety, trauma, and that's what we're doing. Our flagship program is 3-day desert camps for teens who have been evacuated from their homes, both from the north and the south. We've already hosted 12 or 1,300 teens and have another 1,000 on the way. They and their parents are reporting it's a real game changer for how they're feeling about this. So great to see everybody here. We're going to get going in just a minute, and we have a webinar that's some people thought we didn't need to pile bad news on the rest of the bad news that coming out of Israel, but we're here to protect nature, and the avian flu that we're going to be discussing today is a not not insignificant event so far, and something that we really need to keep an eye on. So. For those of you who are birders, of course, probably aware of it and concerned. For those of you who are not particularly birders, but concerned about environmentalism in general and wildlife protection in Israel, the avian flu is definitely something we should be keeping an eye on. So that is what we're doing tonight. I think we'll get going in just a minute, just checking out where everybody's from, of course, from Israel and the Berkshires. Yes. Ramat Beit Shemesh in Jerusalem and LA and Ashkelon and Santa Fe and Philly and London and Maryland and Beersheba and Norway and Austin, Texas. Guys, love having everybody here tonight. I'm Jay, coming to you from
Johannesburg.
Israel, from Tel Aviv. And with us tonight is Dr. Yoav Perlman. He's the relatively new director of BirdLife Israel. That's the birding division of SPNI, birding conservation, protecting Israel's local birds and also our migratory birds. Is one of the most important prime directives of SPNI. Yoav filled the very big shoes of Dan Alone, who until recently was the longtime director of BirdLife Israel, what used to be called the Israel Ornithological Center, and is the birding department of SPNI. And also with us is Nadav Israeli. He is our field operative. He is a director of birding stuff in the north. He's the guy on the ground in our startup nature rewilding projects, both in Kfar Rupin and Magan Michael, two very different kinds of habitats. And Nadav has been probably the most instrumental guy in the actual rewilding work going on there. They'll talk about that as well, and about the winter season coming to a close now. 78 degrees Fahrenheit in Tel Aviv yesterday or the day before, I think. Cooled off today, but wow, spring is in the air. There's been a lot of rain in the last month in this country. I'd like to hear a little bit about that as well. So, no further ado, I think I'm going to introduce Dr. Perlman, Yoav. He's got a presentation. And Dove will speak then, and then Yoav will clean up, and we'll have some questions afterwards. So put your questions and answers in the put your questions in the Q&A if you can, and we'll meet at the end. Thanks very much. Thank you, Yoav. Thank you, Nadav.
Thanks. Thanks, Jay, for the introduction. It's 2.5 years, Jay, by the way. I'm not that new anymore.
Okay, okay, it's true.
Time flies, huh?
It does.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. Good to see lots of familiar names pop up in the list here. I will, together with Nadav, will give sort of an overview of what's happening currently in the world, but most importantly in Israel. We're now at the end of could call it a mini outbreak that affected our cranes. And we'll talk about that as well. Nadav will share some of his personal experiences. He lives up in the Hula Valley, the epicenter of the outbreak. And then I will wrap up with some conclusions and looking forward. So yeah, let's get going. So avian flu is a disease that hits birds mainly. It's sort of omnipresent. It's apparent in Israel every year in small numbers, so it's not unusual to have few cases of avian flu in wild birds, but also in the poultry industry. The first major outbreak that we experienced in Israel was in December 2021. Some of you may have participated in the emergency webinar we did back then. It was really a traumatic event, very, very painful. 9,000 cranes died in that event, and a lot of issues arose from the way that it was mishandled or not properly handled by the authorities in Israel. There were a lot of important lessons to be learned, but it was really a monumental event in our history of bird conservation in Israel. And we thought it really changed the way that things were working. And after the outbreak, there were different investigations done and a lot of meetings and lesson learning sessions and things like that. And some very nice documents were produced by the relevant authorities, different agencies, governmental agencies. And this new concept of One Health that is evolving around the world that combines environmental health and human health and animal health. It sort of moved forward as the main approach on how to manage such incidents in the future. So at least I personally felt that we came out of the 2021 event with a better understanding of how these events need to be managed in the future, because it was clear that it wasn't a one-time event. Certainly, we were expecting more events in the future. A quick introduction about avian flu. So avian flu is a virus similar to the human avian flu virus. It affects mainly birds, and it moves between wild birds and birds that are part of the poultry industry. Both wild birds and poultry birds are very, very important in shifting and moving the virus from place to place. Wild birds, through their migration, they certainly move the virus from continent to continent. This is what happened here in Israel, because Israel is such an important country for migratory birds. It's not unusual to find here birds with avian flu. And in the poultry industry, certainly the way that these farms are managed, how they manage their biological security is very, very important in how this virus is moved from farm to farm, and especially the interface between farm birds and wild birds is very, very, very crucial in how this how outbreaks can be managed. Humans can get exposed to avian flu. It doesn't happen often. It happens mainly to people who are in direct, very, very intensive contact with poultry birds, usually people working in chicken farms and in markets where these birds are sold. So that's how it usually works. The outbreak that we had in Israel in the end of 2021 wasn't a solitary incident. It was, of course, part of a global pandemic. It started or sort of picked up in autumn and fall 2021, just before it arrived in Israel, in some cases in Western Europe, and then it arrived in Israel. These are the cases of avian flu around the world until from 2016 to the middle of 2023, more or less, as it's very apparent that most or many cases are reported from Western Europe, a lot of reports from North America, South America as well, Japan, and it's very, very apparent that many parts of the country have no indications of avian flu. Look at the map of Africa, it's mainly clean, and Russia, China, no reports from there. It's quite evident that it's not because that there's no avian flu there, but just the testing and reporting is probably not done the same way as it's done in other parts of the world. But certainly there's avian flu almost all over the world. So after we had our event in the Hula Valley in the end of 2021, the pandemic sort of kept moving around the world, and it kept hitting bird populations in different places. For endangered species or species with small populations, this can be very, very problematic from a conservation point of view. This is an example of the Dalmatian pelicans that were hit in spring, summer 2022 at their main breeding colonies in Greece. The number of dead Dalmatian pelicans from this event, 2,286, about 10% of the global population. It's a globally threatened species. So this event really, really changed the global situation of Dalmatian pelicans. Similar story with the Greenland breeding barnacle geese that were hit in Scotland just before the pandemic broke in Israel in fall 2021. About 40% of the barnacle geese breeding in Greenland got wiped out in this outbreak. So very, very serious conservation implications. For many years, but especially in recent years, there's a lot of study about this disease, trying to identify the different strains, different types of the disease. It's important to understand that this disease is a very, very fast evolving disease. It keeps changing all the time. New variants, new mutants are being created all the time, especially as the disease moves from place to place in the world. Some variants are more are more dangerous to birds. They spread faster, they kill faster than others, and it's important to detect which strain is involved in each outbreak. And there's a lot of scientific effort to try and understand this disease better. Rather new development of the avian flu global pandemic is that the recent strains or variants are affecting more mammals. This is a map of avian flu detections in mammals since 2016, again in Western Europe, North America, and South America. It hits both farm animals, but also a lot of wild animals and also animals in the fur industry were hit in quite a few cases. And what's very worrying is the marine mammals. So there are many cases, quite many cases of marine mammals being hit by avian flu. This sort of makes some sense because in many places, these marine mammals are associated with marine birds, or at least they use the same strips of beach, same colonies, very often together, seals and seabirds, for instance. And there have been some quite frightening cases of outbreaks. For example, in Argentina, in the last fall, major blow for the southern elephant seal. Another very difficult and worrying development of this disease that it finally arrived in Antarctica. A few months ago, there were the first detections in the sub-Antarctic islands. This is a brown skua in South Georgia. And a few weeks or months later, already it spread to albatrosses. This is a big issue. Many of the albatross species breeding on the sub-Antarctic islands are already globally threatened with very small and vulnerable populations. So this is bad news for instance, the wandering albatross, the world's longest winged bird. So they're already being affected by HPAI, avian influenza. And recently, avian flu has been detected in penguins on the Antarctic continent itself. So that's very worrying. Regarding humans, as I said earlier, avian flu doesn't infect humans very easily. In the last 20 years, there have been less than 250 cases, so it's not highly infectious. However, the people who do get infected, it can be quite fatal, high mortality rates. And that's certainly something to look out for, especially with the development of the new strains that are hitting more mammals. Certainly it increases the risk, or at least the fear, that avian flu will start affecting more people. And coming up to our times now, we understood that, again, avian flu is waiting for us around the corner. Only a few months ago, December 2023, huge mortality event of cranes by avian flu in Hungary. 30,000 cranes died there in a very dramatic outbreak. And that was really a warning sign for us here in Israel. We understood that it's coming. This is already our flyway, the eastern side of Europe. So we knew it's coming, and indeed, in January, we started to see first indications, and now I'll hand over to Nadav. Nadav, I'm passing you the control. Here you go. So Nadav will share some of his experiences from the Hula Valley. I'll just mute myself.
And I will unmute myself and go back. Fully. Can you take me back, Yoav? Because I'm not back. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Nadav. I'll take it from here. So as you have mentioned, we started to see the first indications in cranes at the end of January this year. We had previous indications for avian flu in Israel in several species of wild birds already during December of 2023 and during January. But also already in November and December of 2023, we had evidence in poultry. Um, and so, like you have said, we knew it was coming. So the first indication of one dead crane that was picked up in the east side of the Hula Valley. After a few days, um, we got the answers back from the lab. That is H5N1, the highly pathogenic strain of avian flu, and since then it all started. So just to let you know where we are, this is the map of Israel, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Hula Valley is at the eastern and northern eastern part of the Israel, just at the slope at the foothills of the Golan Heights and Mount Hermon in the north part of the valley, not far from the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. So we have two major sites in the Hula Valley. One is the Hula Nature Reserve in the south part of the valley. It's the first nature reserve in Israel that is hoping to preserve some of the wildlife that exists in this area before it was drained. Until 1951, this whole area was quite a big wetland, and it was drained in the 1950s. So this is the first nature reserve in Israel, managed by the INPA, Israel Nature and Parks Authority. And the other site that was built in the 1990s is the Agamon Hula JNF Park, which is it's a reconstructed wetland at the center of the valley. So immediately when we got the results back from the lab that it's avian flu, the management of the Agamon Hula JNF Park decided to treat it as like it's an outbreak. We had only, even though we had only one dead crane, they decided to treat it like it's an outbreak. And to be honest, since quite the beginning of the war we are experiencing now in Israel, the Agamon site was closed to visitors because it's quite close to the border with Lebanon. So there weren't many visitors in the area to start with. But even though they decided to close it completely to visitors and to citizens, so nobody except for the farmers that are farming the fields around the site could get in, and every car that got in and out from the park was sterilized. The wheels and the bottom part of the vehicle were sterilized, and the Agamon JNF Park had daily tours around the park to locate ill-looking or dead cranes, and they immediately picked them up and took them to a designated place to dispose them. After a few days, the INPA did the same in the Hula Nature Reserve, and followed a very similar protocol to the protocol that was followed in the Agamon JNF Park. But the questions mark is what we're talking about. The questions mark are the fields, the farm fields around those parks and sites that are agricultural land, but since we had a very rainy January, so a lot of those farm fields were flooded with water. This is actually here flows the Jordan River. So the Jordan River was flooding some of the fields around it. and cranes like to stay during the night to roost standing in flooded fields or in open water. So cranes took advantage of the fact that there were flooded fields around the Agamon and just spend the night in those fields. And also when they started dying from avian flu, they died on those fields. And the management of the Agamon were taking care of their area, and the INPA were taking care of their area, but nobody was really taking care of the cranes dying in those areas. And I think this is the role that we took upon ourselves as the SPNI, first to monitor and to bring information straight from the field and to let the authorities in Israel know about it. I mean, they let the people who are in charge, let them know about it and urge them to start working on picking or collecting the dead cranes from the fields and dispose of them, because this is the main thing you can do in outbreak in wild birds. So I was there almost every morning, and this is a video I took on February 14th when I counted 115 dead cranes. I'll try to play the video now. It was there. Okay. So you see, this is a potatoes field that was sown only about 10 days before it was flooded. But since it was flooded, all the potatoes were rotting in the ground. So the crop was lost completely. But the cranes were roosting in this field and also feeding on the potatoes in the field, but also dying from avian flu. So you can see the dead cranes just lying in the mud, and healthy cranes are feeding around them. And that was a very dangerous situation because this is how the virus goes from dead cranes that were infected to healthy cranes. And this combination of dead cranes lying in the water and healthy cranes feeding next to them is a very dangerous combination. This is February 14th, already 2 weeks after the first case. And at that time, no authority in Israel took responsibility to take action. So we decided, that's another photograph I took, I can't remember exactly when, but we decided we had to put some pressure on the authorities in Israel and went to the press in Israel, and that was published in February 15. It did make some noise, and the authorities sprang to action, but still, it took quite a good time for them to actually start picking them up. So you can see the numbers from 115 dead cranes in February 15. Only 3 days later, at the same place, I counted 211 dead cranes. I don't think we need to see this whole video clip. And only the last weekend, the 1st of March, the Ministry of Agriculture and the INPA, the Israeli Nature and Parks Authority, hired a contractor to start picking up the dead cranes from that particular farm field in the Hula Valley. So far, in 2.5 or 3 days of working, he collected close to 150 dead cranes. There's still some that are in the field and need to be picked up. in their favor, I can say that it was a very rainy winter in Israel. The field was very muddy. It was quite hard to walk in the field and collect the dead cranes. So we took more than we think that it should take this time, and especially the next time, because like you have mentioned, there's almost no doubt that there will be a next time, because this avian flu is spreading all over the world and coming year after year. I do have to say that you have said in the beginning that in the outbreak in 2021, there were about 25,000 cranes in the Hula Valley. 9,000 of them died during a period of just over one month. This time, there were about 10,000 cranes in the Hula Valley, and about 400 of them died. So we're not sure exactly why the outcomes of this outbreak were not as bad as the outcomes of the last outbreak. There could be several reasons, but to sum it all, we counted about 400 dead cranes, most of them in the agricultural fields of the Hula Valley. And at the moment, there are less than 20 cranes that we can count with symptoms still in the fields. Hopefully, they might get better, or they will end their life like the other dead cranes, and hopefully will be picked up quickly and will not spread it to other cranes or wildlife. Another thing I saw when I was counting the dead cranes in the field is quite a lot of raptors, birds of prey, coming to feed on the dead crane. This is very common in the Hula Valley in winter. We have quite a lot of birds of prey in the winter in the Hula Valley, and usually they feed on dead cranes. But the problem here is that they're feeding on cranes that were affected by the avian flu, and there is a chance that avian flu will spread to birds of prey. There are no or very few evidence of that from Israel, only to common buzzards, but there are evidence of that from other places in the world, of transfer from other birds to birds of prey through birds of prey preying on birds that died from avian flu. These are 5 marsh harriers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 marsh harriers out of 15 I counted at the same field in one afternoon. Yoav, I think that's it for me, and if there will be any questions later, and back to you.
Thanks, Nadav. So as Nadav said, it seems that we are beyond the peak of the outbreak. It wasn't a major outbreak, but certainly a significant outbreak. I think it was more a matter of luck than anything else that it didn't explode like it did in the past. And as Nadav mentioned, there were fewer cranes to start with. Certainly, since the outbreak in December 2021, numbers of cranes wintering in Israel have dropped. I think that there were some good management practices at the early days of the outbreak that were important by the JNF, for instance, that they increased the water level, preventing the cranes from forming a very, very large and tight roost in the waters of the Agmon, and forced the cranes to disperse a bit and roost in smaller roosts. So that was a good decision, I think. Also, there was a somewhat more controversial decision to stop feeding the cranes. We'll talk about that in a minute. But in the crane project there, the Israel Nature and Parks Authority decided to prevent the feeding in the crane project there, and it certainly had an effect on how the birds were concentrated. Looking forward, we are now at the early days of spring migration. However, these are already very, very intensive days of migration. Thousands of cranes are flying over Israel. Yesterday, I had over my house in central Israel several thousands, and all of these birds coming from Africa will land in the Hula Valley. White storks as well, big days of stork migration now. Thousands or tens of thousands are passing every day. And again, large flocks will be landing in the Hula Valley. And we are looking in fear and anticipation to see how they manage to pass through the avian flu infected Hula Valley. Fingers crossed, their stay there will be short and they will move on without getting infected, but certainly it's something to look out for. And certainly it gives us some important lessons on how concentrations of birds need to be managed. And I'll elaborate a bit on that. In many places in the world, not only in Israel, but certainly in Israel, in different places, we, conservation organizations and conservation agencies, take action to, for instance, reduce agricultural conflicts in ways that cause concentration. I'll show this video. This is a video from a reservoir where the Israel Nature and Parks Authority is feeding pelicans to prevent them from destroying adjacent fish farms. So to reduce the pressure on fish farms in a designated reservoir, huge amounts of fish are filled in there. And just imagine if there's a beginning of an avian flu outbreak in this huge concentration of pelicans. Very, very, very scary. This is important. It's an important context also for some of our breeding birds. In Atlit, there's a breeding colony of terns. Two tern species, common tern and little tern, breed there. Over 95% of the breeding population in Israel breeds in that tern colony. In some places, really, they breed very close to each other, shoulder to shoulder. And outbreaks are a big, big issue. It's a big risk to have such a high proportion of a single species breeding in a single site. And we are working there with our partners, the Nature and Parks Authority and the Salt Factory in Atlit, to develop other colonies away from the main colony to reduce the density there, but it's not working very well yet. And certainly pandemics or outbreaks are a big issue there. Only last summer, in June 2023, there was an outbreak of a mysterious disease. We're not sure what it was. It wiped out the entire chicks, all the chicks in that tern colony. Over 95% of his chicks died within about a week. So it's a big, big, big issue on how we manage our colonial birds. It's important to understand that the cranes, the pelicans, the terns, the storks, they're colonial birds. They flock naturally. They flock without our interference or without our manipulation. But we certainly, through our actions, going to concentrate them even more. And that's a strong consideration in how we manage our wildlife sites, for instance. And looking back to the Hula Valley, I know that some of the participants have taken part in our tours and in other tours in the Hula Valley, and certainly it's a very, very strong experience to drive in that tractor through the fields in the Hula Valley and to get blown away by the sounds and the sights of tens of thousands of cranes. However, with the avian flu becoming part of our regular management, it's not a once every 50 years event. It's once every 2 years, once every 3 years, maybe. We don't know how often it will hit the cranes, but certainly I think that the organizations, the agencies who manage the lands there, the JNF, INPA are involved, we're involved as well. We need to think very, very carefully, very critically on how we manage the Hula Valley in respect to cranes, how we reduce the pressure on the agricultural fields through feeding. Feeding increases the density there, and it's something that can be very dangerous. And we saw demonstrations of that already twice, and there's no reason to think that it won't repeat again. So that's one process that needs to happen, and we are pushing, as SPNI, we're pushing forward and nudging the people who are the other stakeholders to develop our thoughts, to develop our decisions, and become a bit more advanced in our management there. Certainly, a change needs to be done in how the Hula Valley is managed for cranes. And one of the main solutions that we are promoting is more and more restoration, more and more land, agricultural land, that needs to be converted to wild spaces. If, for instance, in the Hula Valley, the cranes are offered with more wild fields, wild spaces with rich resources, lots of food, lots of places to roost. It will enable to reduce their densities. We are working with our partners there, the JNF, the INPA, to extend the area that's managed for nature there. It will hopefully happen within the next few years. We are doing whatever we can to make it happen. In the Hula Valley, also in other parts of the country, I'm very thrilled to expose our newest development in startup nature. We have a new, beautiful reservoir that is ours, or our management. We signed a new agreement with Kfar Upin only recently. This is really a beautiful, beautiful reservoir full of birds. We're very proud to be able to manage it optimally for nature, for birds. It's called Safa Reservoir. In the background is the kibbutz Kfar Upin. To the right is the Jordan Valley and the mountains in Jordan. So it's a beautiful, beautiful reservoir, and I hope that some of you soon will come back to Israel. Do get in touch with us. We'll be very, very happy to show you this reservoir, Safa Reservoir, and Amud Reservoir, the previous project we have in Kfar Upin. Yeah, so this is really what we think is the best thing to do to reduce densities of birds, to provide more and more natural spaces through restoration, through rewilding. We practice that in the things that we do, and we also promote it with other land managers and stakeholders. Yeah, this is all for this evening from our side. Please do follow us through our website, through our social media. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. Thank you for supporting. If you wish to donate to our activities, the link is here in the bottom of the screen. And I think David will put it in the chat soon. So yeah, please consider supporting our work. Thank you in advance.
Wow, thank you very much, Yoav, Nadav. Very enlightening, sobering, and when you get to the part about the restoration, just so helpful. I think we should give people the idea, though, the scope of what we're talking about. I used to say when we started this startup nature rewilding project, turning fish farms that have become not profitable into these healthy wetland habitats, that we wanted to create mini hulas all over Israel. But I would say we want to recreate hulas all over Israel now. We have shown the model works. The authorities are on board. You mentioned the JNF and the Nature and Parks Authority, but also the authority, the Rivers and Drainage Authority, the local councils, the kibbutzim themselves, and according to the UN and Israeli policy, we're supposed to rewild 30%. We're supposed to preserve 30% of every kind of special habitat. And as most people know, or maybe they're surprised to learn that some 95% of Israel's wetland habitats no longer exist. If you compare it to the beginning of Zionism, say in the late 19th century, most of them were since the 1920s, they've been drained for agriculture and for settlement, and they've dried up and they've been overused, etc. But Israel desalinated water. We have water security now. Getting water back to nature is already a thing that the Nature and Parks Authority was looking at and the Israel Water Company. And now we've shown a credible model to rewild and to save birds along the way, not just by providing fuel and rest over stops in the flyway, but to spread them out. In other words, I can't help thinking that we cannot, I don't think a mask mandate is going to work. And we can't have them, wash their beaks and feet every, all the time. So social distancing is what we can do. And this is our plan for social distancing. Anyway, thank you guys a lot. There's a couple questions here. I see another one about the disposal of the birds, Nadav. They're burned. What exactly happens?
Eventually, yes. Some of them will be buried, and maybe some of them will be burned as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but certainly the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Agriculture are active in that, doing it according to strict regulations, and everything is done properly with the adequate protection. So that side is managed quite professionally.
And yet the whole, fiasco of whose job it is, it seems a little late in the game, both vis-a-vis avian flu. I understand it was a new thing in the sense that a lot of birds died on farmers' lands, but still, it seems like there should be a ready response team or something, not like weeks of trying to find a contractor or whatever.
Yeah, that's correct. We were quite disappointed. We were hoping that the lessons learned after the 2021 outbreak would be executed this time, and we were disappointed that they were not. Certainly, it was important work that we did at SPNI, pushing, lobbying, pressuring the different authorities to spring into action. It took longer than we had hoped for, but eventually it did happen. Certainly, we need to look to the future and to think how the system can work more effectively, because certainly it won't be the last avian flu webinar that we do for SPNI. I'm afraid that we'll do another one next winter or in 2 years again.
Well, you'll have.
I do have to mention the Agamon JNF management, who immediately sprang to action and did exactly what they should be doing and did it perfectly. And in the Agamon itself, they collected about 70 dead cranes. And from that, after they collected the dead cranes, most of them immediately the day they found them or the day after, there were no more dead cranes in the park. So they showed that efficient and immediate response is effective. So if the authority in Israel will respond immediately and effectively, we can do much better.
Well, I mean, what I hear from that story, Nadav, is that given that the JNF has a team ready, able, willing, and competent to do that immediately, if we can't nationalize the JNF, we should at least nationalize that unit and require them
Yeah.
subcontractors and whatever. I mean, who
Mhm.
cares on what side of the line, some imaginary borderline, some flooded field, a bird died on which side? I mean, it seems like a Talmudic thing. What if half of the bird is on JNF side and half the what do they slice it in half? I mean, jeez.
Yeah, no, but certainly there was need for national coordination, which was lacking.
Well,
So
are we
the
going to push for that, Yoav? That's what I
we
wanted.
did,
I
we
want you
did.
to.
So the individual organizations, as Nadav said, the JNF and the INPA, they did what they need to do in their own land, but the national coordination to sort of oversee the issue and also to prevent a spillover from the wild birds to the poultry industry. We were
Yeah,
very cautious of that already. The poultry farms in the Galil, in the Upper Galilee, are suffering very hard from the war. Many of the poultry farms are right on the Lebanese border, and if avian flu had arrived into these farms, that would be really catastrophic. So, um, yeah, there was certainly national coordination lacking there.
yeah. But to me, it's more than the coordination; it's the actual doing it. It seems like if there's a group that should do it, they should be immediate and do it before
Yeah.
there's coordination. Anyway, it's my 2 cents. Um, Somebody asked, do the some birds with avian flu recover or do they all die? I'm thinking of the similar thing. In other words, maybe there's a smaller outbreak this year because there's some sort of herd immunity going on.
That might be one of the reasons. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly we know that some birds can recover and become immune, and that's how they also move the disease from country to country. They get infected, they recover, and they migrate on with the virus. Um, Certainly, this can have long-term effects. I mean, we think that the low numbers that we're seeing in the Hula Valley in recent years after the large outbreak in 2021 could be sort of an aftermath effect of lower breeding success across the population. It's a speculation at the moment. We don't have any proof for that yet, but it's something that scientists are looking into, certainly.
Interesting. Any idea what percent of birds that are infected die? Is it most of them? Just a few of them?
It's very hard to say because I assume that many birds are infected without showing any
Right.
neurological or pathogenic signs, and they just
It's,
recover. Probably those that are more acutely infected do start to develop the symptoms.
I
So
mean, it is literally
hard to
COVID all
say.
over again. After we learned about, that we now are like we're veterinary epidemiologists. We have to be.
But certainly the cases in Israel, especially the outbreak in 2021, was studied around the world. It was an important event, and the way it was handled, there were some good lessons to be learned from the management of that outbreak then. So
Anybody
certainly,
funding that work on a vaccine? Do you know?
I
Is it
know that there is work to try and vaccinate poultry birds. For wild birds, of course, it's very difficult. I know that there's some work being done on wild marine mammals now, trying to develop a vaccine for seals, for instance. But I think for wild birds with their mobility, it's much more challenging.
okay? Is there any way to treat the cranes with treat the water? Does anything kill the flu if it's in the water? Or
In I know that in 2021 in some smaller water reservoirs that there were cases of avian flu with some places where there were pelicans actually. The water was treated with some um, disinfectant. In places like the Gamon Hula, that's a more natural wetland with water coming in and coming out. It's not easy to treat the water, and certainly if we're looking at what happened this year with the flooded potato fields, it's quite impossible, I think, to treat the water here in that scenario.
Okay. Question to Nadav, have you been in touch with the people in Hungary? You know what's going, has it since then, or what's going on there?
I've been in touch with the people there, so yeah, it was quite a short and dramatic event, but I think it ended. So it was in December, and by January already it ended. Many of the cranes moved on from there, and it's not continuing there. It stopped in the end of December.
Okay. See, I'm now in the chats here. Can we share any more short videos about SPNI? I think there are some on our site already, Sharon, but if you write to us, we can probably link them together for you. We have several good videos. There have been several news magazine pieces on the Israeli Channel 11, I think, and Channel 13, both about our rewilding work and our Nature Heals work. Getting Israelis out to nature. So, and we have some older videos as well. Uh, do we expect there to be mammals that are going to be? People are asking both about mammals and turtles.
Um,
Any
I
expected outbreaks? Do we know?
I I don't know about Israel. I mean, it has happened in Western Europe, in North America. It could happen in the animal industry in Israel as well.
But it has never happened yet. It's
But we
always
don't
been.
Not that I'm
Right.
aware of.
we don't
No.
know of any recorded um,
It-
infection in
right.
mammals in Israel,
Right. And
nor
but in the
turtles.
nor turtles.
Yeah, not that I know of.
And in the United States, by the way, I saw there was a dot on that global map that there's been an infection of avian flu in the States. Do you know if there have been any mammals or other
Cer-
non-birds
Yes, certainly the
in the
large
States?
numbers of mammals. Yeah, it's something that we didn't really talk about in this webinar. We focused on wild birds, but the implications of this ongoing global pandemic really has to make us think very carefully on how we consume our meat, how how we raise the animals in the poultry and the animal industry. Certainly, there are some strong implications on the security, the biological security of these farms. I'm not an expert in this field, so I can't say much. I just say that certainly we need to think carefully in how we consume our meat, how we grow our meat. Some serious questions there.
Interesting. And the food tech industry in Israel is answering them,
Sure,
hopefully.
trying to answer. Yeah,
Trying to answer them, beginning to answer them. I mean, I think that industry is in for a big disruption. I hope. Um, Question from that somebody writes that they've seen a lot of sick-looking turtles anyway. So if it's not avian flu, any idea? Is there some turtle outbreak going
I'm
on?
just writing there. I'm just writing Victoria back. There could be many reasons for dead wildlife and dead turtles in particular, but uh, on the safe side, if Victoria is able to send location and even photos, we can report that to the INPA, and if the turtles are still there, they can take samples and send them to the lab.
yeah. The
Excellent.
INPA hotline is star 3639. Maybe someone can put it in the chat for people in Israel. If there are cases of wild birds that seem unhealthy or dead or other wild animals, please report them to the INPA, star 3639.
Wow. Thank you. Well, cool. I think we're coming to the end of the hour, and we've covered a lot of ground here.
Certainly
Um,
did.
Pun intended. Thank you guys very, very much. I want to thank everybody
On the
who joined
bright
us.
side, Jay, just before that, on the bright side, spring is coming to Israel. Birds are migrating through. Hopefully, it's going to be a wonderful spring, and
Nice.
All the birds and all the other creatures will go back to their homes.
Yes, and we are actually inviting people in the fall to come on our trips. Check out our November trip, but we're also running day trips in Israel for English speakers. We have a couple planned in March, and by tomorrow, I think we're gonna have a few planned through the end of April through Passover, and we're gonna be going on through at least the end of June or July, with regularly scheduled one-day trips to our various nature sites, all coordinated with the home front command. But a lot of we know that there are a lot of tourists coming to Israel now on all kinds of solidarity missions. So if you're coming, or if you know people that are coming, groups that are coming, we're happy to take you out to nature. I mean, it's an incredible way to relax yourself and to see what what SPNI is doing to protect nature and to protect society through nature right now. So very, very good stuff. Thank you guys very, very much. Thank you, David Amichai at home doing our back office. And yeah, Nadav and Victoria, you can continue. Victoria, you can get to Nadav through us if you'd like to. Anybody, any questions, anybody coming to Israel, any other things you'd like to discuss or let us know, be in touch. Thank you all very much. Laila Tov.
Bye,
Good afternoon.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Jonathan. Bye bye.
Bye
Thanks,
bye.
David.